You think I'm stealing from you, Mr. Wellington? Sophia's voice was low, calm but firm as steel. She stood at the threshold of Esperanza Community Center, the tray in her hand still coated with flour. Her apron was wrinkled, her sleeves pushed up, and her eyes locked onto his with the full weight of a confrontation she didn't want, but refused to avoid. Marcus Wellington didn't flinch, not outwardly, but inside, something stirred. This wasn't how he imagined the evening ending. He, the CEO of Wellington Capital, a man whose gaze could silence a boardroom, had parked his Cadillac in a narrow, cracked lot behind a church just to follow a junior employee. Not just any intern, Sophia Bennett. The quiet one. Too quiet, observant, polite, unassuming, and, in his mind, suspicious. In Marcus's world, trust was a luxury. He'd earned his seat in a city that wasn't made for men like him by seeing betrayal before it happened. So when project files began to slip and confidential drafts mysteriously disappeared, he didn't wait. He watched. And when Sophia started leaving work early, always with some excuse that didn't quite land, he made a choice. He followed her. What he expected was a hotel, a handoff, a stranger waiting with a briefcase. What he found was this: a fading green building with sagging gutters, elderly women lined up for warm meals, children racing with makeshift toys, and in the middle of it all, Sophia, sleeves rolled, laughter honest, balancing trays of rice and soup as she guided a boy through English vocabulary printed on the back of recycled financial reports. His financial reports, and now here they were, face to face. "I've been watching you," Marcus admitted finally. "I know," she replied without blinking. "I had to be sure. You were leaving with confidential documents. You never explained where you were going." I didn't think I owed you a breakdown of my evenings," she said, lifting her chin. "But since you asked those sealed papers, they're scrap now. I use them to print lesson plans for kids who can't afford textbooks. I leave early because some of these people only eat once a day, and that day is today." Marcus looked past her, through the scratched plexiglass. Inside, a frail man grinned as he folded napkins into shapes for the children. A teenage girl helped another lace up donated sneakers. "I thought you were selling us out," he murmured. Sophia's expression didn't soften. "You thought I was less than I am." He opened his mouth, searching for words, but she stepped forward, not threatening, just present. "I don't need your applause," she said. "I don't want a feature in your newsletter. What I need is space to do the right thing, and the dignity not to be followed like a criminal." Her words cut clean. "There's a difference," she added, her voice quieter now, "between being seen and being watched. I've had enough of the second. There are moments that make us wonder, do we really understand others? Or do we only see them through the lens of our own judgment? What about you? Do you think Marcus deserves a second chance? Or should Sophia have been even tougher? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which city you're watching from, so we can connect from all corners of the world. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like to help spread its message. Who knows? Your point of view might spark a conversation that makes everyone stop and think. Marcus's throat tightened. He'd negotiated takeovers, dismantled rivals, walked out of hearings unfazed. But this felt like shame. "I'm sorry, Sophia." She nodded once, not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement. "Next time," she said, "maybe ask before you doubt someone." With that, she turned and disappeared into the soft light of the center, back to the children, the elders, the life she never advertised. Marcus stood there a long while. The night air was cool, brushing past his expensive coat like it belonged to someone else. His world spreadsheets, numbers, cold strategy had just been pulled open at the seams by a girl he didn't truly know. As he walked back to his car, a voice echoed in his mind, not hers but his own, from another lifetime. People don't change the world through power. They change it by doing what's right quietly. He'd forgotten that. Until now. And as the city lights flickered on behind him, Marcus Wellington didn't feel powerful. He felt human. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Marcus Wellington didn't drive home immediately. He sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the cracked windshield of a car parked across from him. The street outside Esperanza was quiet now, the center's lights dimming one by one, leaving the soft glow of an old exit sign the only trace of life inside. The image of Sophia, firm and composed, standing there with that tray in her hands, still burned in his mind. Her words echoed not loud, not angry but final. Next time, maybe ask before you doubt someone. He leaned back, closed his eyes. The engine hummed under his feet, but he didn't move. How many times had he misjudged? How many people had he passed over, dismissed, distrusted just because they didn't look, sound, or behave the way his world expected? This wasn't just about an intern. It was about him. His entire empire was built on caution, on suspicion wrapped in charm, in data disguised as instinct. He had risen in a city where every handshake came with a caveat, where trust was a liability. That mindset had served him well in boardrooms. But in life, tonight had been a quiet verdict. When he finally pulled away from the curb, it wasn't with the confidence of a man with answers. It was the retreat of someone who had just received a lesson he didn't know he needed. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the office as usual, early, quiet, efficient. Her hair tied in a low bun, laptop hugged to her chest. She made no mention of the night before. She nodded politely to the front desk, took the elevator to the 26th floor, and slipped into her cubicle with a grace that hid any trace of confrontation. Marcus saw her from his office. He stood at the glass wall, coffee cooling in his hand, watching her unpack her things like nothing had changed. He didn't call her in. He didn't send an email. Instead, he sat at his desk and opened a blank document. For a long time, the cursor blinked. Then, with slow deliberation, he typed the words, Esperanza, confidential grant proposal. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just 24 hours ago, he thought she was smuggling secrets. Now, he was using company resources to figure out how to help her and the people she served. That afternoon, he called his head of philanthropy. "Do we still have the Community Impact Fund from the Spalding merger?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Around 300,000 left. You want to allocate some?" "All of it. Quietly. Anonymous if possible." "To which cause?" Marcus paused. He couldn't bring himself to say her name. "Just a community center in the South District. Esperanza. You'll find it." There was silence on the other end. Then, understood. Sophia noticed the changes before she knew their source. 2 weeks later, a food supplier delivered twice the usual rations to Esperanza. A local bookstore donated 50 Spanish-English readers. Then came a check unsigned that covered a new HVAC unit for the winter. Father Ramon tried to trace the donor but hit dead ends. When he asked Sophia if she knew anything, she just shook her head, though a quiet suspicion formed in her mind. At work, Marcus kept his distance. He reviewed her project reports carefully, not because he still suspected anything, but because now he wanted to understand her mind. She was good, better than most interns they'd had. Her proposals were meticulous, her feedback constructive, and yet, she never spoke up unless spoken to. Until the day she did. It was a Friday. Late. Most of the staff had gone. Marcus was reviewing numbers when he heard a soft knock. "Come in," he called. Sophia stepped in, holding a thin folder. She didn't sit. "I've finished the audit on the Logan account," she said. "There's a pattern in the subcontracts. I think someone's double charging." Marcus took the folder, flipped it open. Her notes were clear, concise, and damning. "This is good," he murmured. "You might have saved us a scandal." She didn't smile. "I didn't come for praise." Marcus looked up. "Then why?" Sophia hesitated. Then, "Because I needed to know if I still belong here." He stared at her. "I know what you did," she added. "With the donation, the supplies. I didn't say anything because I wanted to believe it came from sincerity. But if it's guilt, if you're trying to make amends for spying on me, then I'd rather leave than be someone's penance." Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed a tremor. Marcus rose slowly. He didn't walk around the desk, just stood, heart thudding. "It wasn't guilt," he said. "It was respect. The kind I should have shown you from the start." Sophia blinked. "You opened my eyes," he continued. "Not just to your work, but to how blind I'd become in mine. That deserves more than silence." For the first time, she looked uncertain. "I never wanted to be seen," she said quietly. "Just understood." And for once, Marcus Wellington, the man who always had the last word, said nothing, because she had said enough. The following week, the office was humming as usual, printers clicking. heels tapping along the marble floors, low murmurs behind frosted glass. But something had shifted in Marcus. He no longer saw his staff as cogs in a machine. Now, he saw layers, histories, people hiding full lives behind tight-lipped professionalism. He hadn't spoken to Sophia again since their last exchange, not because he didn't want to, but because he respected the space her words demanded. I never wanted to be seen, just understood. That line echoed with every step he took down the hallway. It made him question how many voices he had ignored in his pursuit of perfection. Then came the quarterly review meeting. Sophia was asked to present her analysis of 3 project portfolios, each one tied to multi-million-dollar funding. Normally, an intern wouldn't speak in such a meeting. It was unheard of. But Marcus made the call. "Let her lead the Logan segment," he said, flatly. No one argued, not when the CEO's tone had that edge. When Sophia stood before the boardroom mahogany table, 12 directors, 1 projection screen, she held her composure like armor. Dressed in navy, no makeup, just a single silver bracelet at her wrist. She cleared her throat and began. 15 minutes in, something remarkable happened. People listened, not out of politeness, but necessity. She had facts, she had vision. She didn't just identify risks, she proposed solutions. Smart ones, scalable, human-centered. Even the oldest partners, the ones who rarely lifted their gaze from printouts, were watching her now. And Marcus? He leaned back in his chair, silent, proud in a way he couldn't explain. Not ownership, not mentorship, something more personal. He was witnessing someone come into her own. When Sophia concluded, a pause settled in the room. Then, "She just saved us 6 months of litigation," one partner muttered. Another nodded. "Promote her. Skip the program." Marcus didn't speak until the room cleared. She lingered, gathering her laptop when he said, "Close the door, please." She did, carefully. "You knew they'd listen," Marcus said. "I didn't," she replied. "But I hoped the data would speak louder than the voice delivering it." He smiled slightly. For the record, the voice did just fine. She offered a hint of a smile, but her eyes were wary. "I want you to consider staying," he said. "Beyond the internship. I'll fund whatever additional training you need. Project management, public finance, strategy, you name it." Sophia looked down. "Why?" "Because you're good," he said, then paused. "And because the world needs more people who lead with both skill and purpose, not just one or the other." She didn't answer immediately. Then, "I'll think about it." That weekend, Marcus did something uncharacteristic. He returned to Esperanza. No driver, no press, no schedule. Just himself, a jacket, and a bag of used books he'd pulled from his home library, mostly biographies, old classics, poetry collections gathering dust. He hesitated at the door like an outsider until a boy with shaggy hair waved at him. "You came back," the boy shouted. Sophia turned from a folding table, surprised, but not alarmed. Marcus walked in. "I brought some books," he said, lifting the bag. "Real books?" another child asked, eyes wide. "Hardcover. Even smells like old wood," Marcus replied, cracking a smile. Laughter bubbled around him. Someone turned on a record player in the corner, playing Motown. Marcus set the books on a shelf, then found himself seated between 2 elders debating the merits of chicken broth over beef stew. Sophia joined him later, offering a paper cup of lemonade. "Didn't think I'd see you here again," she said. "I didn't think I'd come," Marcus admitted. "But something about this place feels like a world outside the world," she finished. They sat quietly for a while. Then she asked, "Do you regret following me?" Marcus considered the question. "Yes," he said, "but only because it showed me how far I'd strayed from the kind of person I used to respect." Sophia didn't respond, but she didn't need to. Her presence, her calm, her quiet resilience, they were answers in themselves. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the dusty windows gold, a small girl climbed into Sophia's lap and offered Marcus a crayon drawing. It was a house, a sun, 3 people. "You're the tall one," the girl explained. Marcus chuckled. "I can live with that." When he left Esperanza that evening, the air was crisp with fall. Leaves crunching under his shoes, he felt lighter not because the world had changed, but because he had. In the distance, The skyscrapers still glowed cold and silver. But for the first time in years, Marcus Wellington didn't feel alone in the city. He felt connected, as if paper walls had started to fall, and real doors were opening. Monday came with the kind of gray sky that made Seattle feel older than it was. Rain whispered down the office windows, just enough to distort the skyline outside Marcus's corner office. He was already in, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, going over Sophia's proposal for restructuring the firm's community engagement strategy. It was brilliant, not just practical visionary. She understood not only where money should go, but where it would mean something. He barely looked up when his assistant knocked. "You asked to be notified when Mr. Darrow arrived." Marcus blinked. He'd forgotten. Thomas Darrow, head of compliance, had scheduled a meeting weeks ago regarding internal audit security. "Send him in," Marcus said. Darrow walked in, tall, sharp, every word he ever said wrapped in suspicion and statute. He wasn't unkind, just cold, calculated, much like Marcus had once been. "Morning," Darrow said, nodding curtly. "We need to talk about your intern." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Sophia? She's been accessing accounts outside her clearance," Darrow said. "I flagged 2 reports she pulled last Thursday. They're tied to proprietary real estate models sensitive." Marcus leaned back, heart skipping. "She presented those same models in our board review. I asked her to. I gave her temporary clearance." Darrow frowned. "You did? There's no record." "I told her verbally. I hadn't updated the system yet." The man nodded slowly, but his mouth tightened. "Even so, Wellington, it's a breach by technical standards." Marcus felt the pressure behind his eyes. "I'll handle it." When Darrow left, Marcus sat in silence. He wasn't angry with Sophia. He was angry with himself for creating an environment where even her best intentions could be turned against her by bureaucracy. An hour later, he stepped into the elevator just as Sophia was stepping out. "Wait," he said, catching the door. "Walk with me." She followed without question. As they moved through the hallway, Marcus explained the situation. "They're investigating your access to the Logan files," he said. "It's technical, but it could get messy." Sophia stopped walking. "Are they accusing me of something?" "Not formally, yet. But Darrow doesn't let things slide." She stared at the floor for a moment, then met his gaze. "You said you'd protect me." "I am," Marcus replied, "but I also have to protect you from the system I helped build." A pause. Then Sophia said quietly, "I can leave." He frowned. "You've done nothing wrong. That's not always enough," she said. "You know that." And he did, more than she realized. Being a black man at the top hadn't exempted him from silent trials and whispered accusations. It had simply made him better at seeing them coming. "I won't let them touch your record," Marcus said. "I don't care what forms they quote." Sophia nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. Then she asked, "Why is it so easy to suspect people doing the right thing, and so hard to believe that good work can exist without an angle?" Marcus didn't have an answer. They parted ways at the cafe downstairs. Sophia bought a coffee and sat by the window, notebook open but untouched. Marcus watched her from across the glass and saw not an intern, but someone under siege by a machine she never signed up for. That evening, he made a decision. The next day, he walked into the weekly executive meeting with a document in hand. Revised clearance protocols for intern and junior staff collaboration. He passed it down the table. "We're losing talent because we don't trust people who haven't earned some arbitrary title. That stops today." There was pushback questions, raised eyebrows, but Marcus stood firm. "This isn't just about one intern," he said. "It's about changing the culture we've all quietly fed, one where silence is safer than innovation." And for once, no one interrupted him. After the meeting, Darrow approached, tight-lipped. "You're setting a precedent." "I hope so," Marcus said. Later that week, Sophia received an official notice. Clearance granted, with recommendation for junior project lead training. It was dry corporate language, but Marcus had added a sticky note. "It's only a door. You're the one opening it." Sophia held it in her hands for a long time, then folded it and slid it into her bag. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. Friday, the sky cleared for the first time in weeks. Marcus passed Sophia in the hallway. She said, I'm going back to Esperanza this weekend. There's a mural we're painting with the kids. We could use more brushes. He smiled. I've got a garage full. She raised an eyebrow. You know how to paint? No, Marcus admitted. But I'm good at making a mess. She laughed, the sound short and genuine. For a moment, they just stood there, not CEO and intern, not power and potential, but two people who had crossed a distance measured not in miles, but in understanding. And somewhere between elevator silence and conference room battles, Marcus had stopped seeing Sophia as a risk. Now, he saw her for what she truly was, a mirror, reflecting the better man he still hoped to become. The late Saturday sun cast a warm amber hue over the cracked pavement of the South District. Children's laughter echoed off graffiti-covered bricks as a dozen hands dipped brushes into buckets of paint cobalt, sunflower, moss green. The outer wall of Esperanza, once faded and flaking, was being transformed into a living story, a mural of bright faces, open books, rising suns. Sophia stood near the center, her ponytail tucked under a worn baseball cap, guiding a young boy's hand as he traced the outline of a tree, his fingers stained purple and gold, his eyes, focused, lit with wonder. Across the lot, a dark SUV pulled in. Marcus stepped out, holding a plastic bag filled with new brushes and a half-dozen old shirts from his college days. He hadn't worn jeans in years, but today he did. Even brought sneakers white, now speckled with blue as he stepped too close to a splattered can. Sophia looked up, surprised but unsurprised. You showed. I said I had brushes, Marcus said, lifting the bag like a peace offering. You also said you'd make a mess, she smirked. Consider that a promise kept. The kids giggled as he approached, some whispering. One pointed at his watch, wide-eyed. Another nudged Sophia. He's really a boss? Sophia knelt beside them. He's learning. Marcus smiled, setting the bag down. You got any unclaimed wall space? She pointed to a narrow column near the corner. That one's yours. No pressure, just the whole neighborhood will see it for years. He chuckled nervously. Perfect. For the next 2 hours, Marcus painted. Badly. His tree was crooked. The sky bled into the roofline. A sun he attempted to draw turned out looking more like a confused tangerine. But he didn't care. He hadn't felt this, unguarded in years. Sophia drifted over once, handing him water. I don't think your son is smiling. Neither are most executives, Marcus replied. Maybe they should. He paused, brush midair. You know, I used to be like them. Every day was numbers, margins, performance. People were tools, assets. Sophia didn't respond immediately. Then, and now? Now I see people as people. Strange, right? She shook her head. It's only strange if you've forgotten how to look. As the mural neared completion, Marcus stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. Children danced around, marveling at their own contributions. Stars, birds, giant hearts, a pair of open arms stretching across the center with words painted in bold script. Where hope begins, fear ends. It took his breath away. Not the art, the feeling. For years, Marcus had defined success as control of people, plans, outcomes. But here, under the fading sun, success looked more like surrender, letting go of fear, of old habits, of the need to always be right. He turned to Sophia. Would you ever consider building something like this full-time? She raised an eyebrow. Like what? A foundation, education, community reform, something funded, structured, impactful. She crossed her arms. You offering me a job outside the firm? I'm offering you a path, he said. One where you don't have to choose between doing good and doing well. Sophia studied him. Unreadable. I don't know, she said eventually. Every time someone offers to build something, it ends up with more paperwork than purpose. Marcus chuckled. Spoken like someone who's seen the wrong kind of boardroom. She glanced back at the mural. I'd need to build it my way. I wouldn't have it any other way. A long pause. Then Sophia extended her paint-covered hand. We'll talk. After the final brushstroke. He took it. Paint and all. Later that evening, as dusk settled and the kids were herded home, Father Ramon joined them near the wall, sipping from a paper cup. She's special, that one, he said, nodding at Sophia, now cleaning brushes with 2 teenagers. Marcus nodded. I know. She doesn't trust easily. Earned everything twice over. Still keeps her heart open. That's rare. Marcus looked at the mural again. She's teaching me things I didn't know I needed. Ramon smiled. That's what the best people do. Not by lecturing, just by being. Marcus stood in silence, hands in his pockets, wind cooling the sweat on his brow. That night, as he drove home with the scent of paint still clinging to his clothes, Marcus Wellington wasn't thinking about his next deal, his next acquisition, or the next quarter's margins. He was thinking about a wall once empty, now filled with color, and a woman who, simply by being herself, was teaching him how to see again. The buzz came Monday morning, not the kind that energized a workplace, but the kind that warned of a storm gathering beyond the glass walls. Whispers slipped from cubicle to cubicle. Emails stopped mid-sentence. Even the hum of printers seemed to quiet in anticipation. At 10:17 a.m., Marcus's assistant entered with a rare look of alarm. You should see this, she said, handing him her tablet. Marcus read the headline once, then again. Whistleblower leaks internal documents from Wellington capital sites, abuse of community funds, and improper hiring practices. He didn't blink. Not yet. He scrolled. Attached to the article was a blurry PDF, a spreadsheet marked confidential, showing funds allegedly funneled into a non-profit with no official status. The name, Esperanza, glared from the corner in red. Sophia. He set the tablet down. Who published this? Local investigative blog. But it's spreading. Marcus stood and moved to the window. Rain traced slow lines down the glass. He knew this game. Smear and spin. A leak timed with precision, likely internal. Someone didn't like the changes he'd begun making, the culture shift, the promotion of an intern, the redirecting of funding away from pet projects and into places like Esperanza. Someone wanted him reined in. Get legal, he said, turning. And tell PR to wait. We don't respond yet. I want to know who did this first. By noon, the board had called an emergency session. By 1, the questions began. Who authorized the transfer to Esperanza? Where are the receipts? Why was an intern handling sensitive accounts? Marcus answered calmly, clearly. I authorized the funding, he said, and Sophia Bennett acted under my direct instruction. Every step she took was approved, even if I hadn't yet formalized it on paper. A murmur rippled through the room. One director, older, skeptical, leaned forward. And why Esperanza? That's not a registered partner organization. Marcus met his gaze. Because it's real. Because it's doing more for this city than half the firms we've hosted galas for. The man blinked. Do you want innovation, or do you want paperwork? Marcus added. No one answered. But he knew the silence wasn't victory, it was warning. Sophia found out just before her shift ended. She was organizing receipts for an unrelated report when a coworker whispered, You're on the news. She froze, clicked, read. By the time she reached the elevator, Marcus was already in her inbox. Subject, come to my office. Now. She walked in, jaw tight, eyes hard. I didn't leak anything, she said before he could speak. I know, Marcus replied. Sit. She did, slowly. They're painting this like I gave you power you weren't ready for, he said, as if helping people means corruption. Sophia stared at the desk. It's my fault. I shouldn't have accepted the clearance without it being official. I should have. No, Marcus cut in. This isn't about a mistake. This is about someone trying to break what we're building. Sophia looked up. So what do we do? He hesitated. Then, we go public. Together. She blinked. What? They want a scandal? Let's give them a truth they can't spin. You speak. I back you. Full transparency. Sophia shook her head. Marcus, I'm an intern. A young black woman in a firm that barely knows my name. They won't hear me, they'll see a headline. That's why I'll stand next to you, he said. Not as your boss, as your witness. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers tapped the armrest in slow rhythm. Then, if I do this, it's not just about clearing my name. I want change, not just for me, but for whoever comes next. Marcus nodded. Deal. The press conference happened 2 days later, in the atrium of the Wellington Capitol building under the same glass ceiling that once made Sophia feel invisible. Now, she stood beneath it with cameras pointed at her, microphones held up like fragile threats. Her hands trembled slightly, but when she spoke, her voice carried. I did not leak documents. I did not misuse company funds. What I did do with the support and authorization of Mr. Wellington was use my time, my skills, and my access to help a community that often goes unseen. Flashbulbs lit the room. What you're seeing now is not a scandal, she continued. It's a mirror, reflecting how uncomfortable we are when young people, especially women of color, are allowed to lead. Marcus stood beside her, not towering, not guarding, just present. He followed with a short statement. There is no corruption here. There is courage. If that's uncomfortable for some, perhaps it's because comfort has long been confused with control. The next morning, the backlash was muted. And the day after that, Esperanza's donations tripled, not from Wellington Capitol, from strangers, from ordinary people who watched a press conference and saw, for the first time in a long time, a truth that didn't feel rehearsed. In the quiet that followed, Sophia walked into Marcus's office and said only this. That wasn't the end. He looked up. No, he said. That was the beginning. 3 days after the press conference, the office returned to its rhythm, or tried to. Meetings resumed. Emails multiplied. Phones rang again with their usual insistence. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Conversations paused when Sophia entered a room. Some were quiet with respect. Others were stiff with doubt. Sophia felt it in every hallway, the lingering gaze, the subtle whisper. She carried herself with poise, but each step through the 26th floor felt like walking across a frozen lake. Too many were waiting for her to fall through. Marcus noticed it too. From his glass office, he watched her navigate the maze of invisible expectations, nodding politely, avoiding confrontation. It pained him how even after being proven right, she had to carry the burden of making others comfortable with her presence. On Friday afternoon, he called her in. Sophia stepped in, her laptop tucked under her arm. You needed me? Yes, Marcus said, gesturing to the chair across from him. But not for a report. She sat, wary. What's this about? I want to talk about what's next. For you, for Esperanza, for all of this. She raised an eyebrow. You're not firing me, are you? He smiled, but it was a tired one. If I did, my entire staff would probably walk out on me now. Sophia didn't laugh. Not quite. Marcus leaned forward. I've had offers, invitations, boards calling. They want me to speak, consult, share the Wellington Bennett model. She rolled her eyes. Of course they do. I'm thinking of saying yes, he continued, but only if you're on that stage with me. Sophia blinked. You want me to co-present with you? Not co-present, he said. Co-lead. She sat back, folding her arms. That's not a small step. It's not a step, Marcus replied. It's a shift, a new department. One we build together: equity, community strategy, education, liaisons, funded, independent, answerable only to results, not old politics. Sophia stared at him, eyes narrowing. And you want to put me in charge? No, Marcus said. I want you to be the reason it exists. The silence between them thickened, not with tension, but gravity. Then Sophia asked softly, why me? Because you live the mission. You don't perform it. He let the words settle, then added, and because one day, someone younger than you will walk through this office wondering if they belong. I want them to see you and know the answer is yes. Sophia exhaled slowly. Her fingers tapped the edge of her chair, a rhythm of doubt and decision. Finally, she said, if we do this, it has to be more than PR, more than panels. Marcus nodded. Agreed. We start with the schools, the forgotten ones, internships, mentorships paid, not token spots. Yes. And we work with real community leaders, not just city-approved faces. Of course. She leaned forward now. And we publish the impact reports, even when they're messy. Marcus met her gaze. Especially when they're messy. Sophia nodded slowly. Then I'm in. He extended his hand. She took it. Paint and all. A month later, the launch of the new division, Wellington Impact Strategies, went public with a modest press release. No fanfare, no gala, just a joint op-ed by Marcus and Sophia titled, "Business Owes the Neighborhood." Within weeks, they were receiving emails from other firms asking for guidance. Colleges requested internship collaborations. A superintendent from Atlanta called, asking if the model could be replicated in underserved districts there. One afternoon, while reviewing proposals, Sophia received a letter, handwritten, no return address. She unfolded it carefully. "Dear Miss Bennett, my granddaughter goes to Esperanza now. She brings home words in English and colors on her hands. Last night, she told me she wants to be like Miss Sophia. Thank you for showing her something different. Yours, Elena V." Sophia held the note for a long moment. Later, she placed it in a small frame and set it beside her monitor. When Marcus passed her office that evening, he paused at the doorway. "You all right?" he asked. She looked up, smiled faintly. "Yeah, just remembering why this matters." He nodded. "I do that too." Outside, the sky was turning gold again, the same gold from the mural. From the afternoon, they first painted a crooked sun on the corner of a broken wall. And inside, something stronger than paint had begun to dry. The foundation of a new future neither of them had expected, but both were ready to build. Autumn arrived in Seattle like a slow exhale, crisp air curling through alleyways, leaves scattered across marble steps outside Wellington Capitol. Inside the newly renovated floor dedicated to impact strategies, a different kind of change was underway. Gone were the glass walls and hushed tones of corporate tradition. Now, corkboards filled with photos from local schools, community project maps, and handwritten notes from youth lined the walls. The space breathed. Sophia walked into the office early one morning, balancing 2 coffees and a folder full of grant applications. She found Marcus already seated at the long communal table, glasses low on his nose, reading a proposal from a youth-led tech nonprofit in Tacoma. "Sleep?" she asked, setting a coffee next to him. He shook his head. "Reading stories that don't make headlines." "You?" 4 hours. 2 emails from teachers in Rainier Beach. "They want laptops." Marcus nodded. "Let's get them laptops." She smiled, but it faded quickly. "There's something else." He looked up. Sophia pulled out her phone, tapping a screen before handing it to him. It was a video clip, grainy, clearly taken on a phone. A man stood behind a podium at a rival firm's gala, laughing as he mimicked the press conference she had led. "And then the intern stands there like she's Gandhi with a filing cabinet," he joked, followed by uneasy laughter. The air in the office thickened. "They're mocking it now," Sophia said. "The whole thing. Esperanza. Me." Marcus didn't flinch. "Let them. They're reshaping the story, Marcus. Turning community work into a punchline. That's what they do when they feel threatened," he replied. "They laugh before they retreat." Sophia sat beside him, her voice lower. "I don't want this to be about pride. I want impact. But I'm tired. I'm so tired of being the face when they keep trying to erase the meaning behind it." Marcus set the proposal aside and turned toward her fully. "Then we shift the game." Sophia looked up. "How?" "We stop reacting," he said. "We go deeper. Not just high schools and internships. We build leadership pipelines, funding networks for BIPOC founders. We make so much change they can't ignore it, even if they never say our names." Sophia stared at him. "That's a war." "It's a movement," he corrected. "And it needs your voice." She paused, then smiled faintly. "And your Rolodex." He laughed. "And my Rolodex." That week, they launched Phase 2. They brought in 10 fellows, students, and activists, some with degrees, others with dreams, to co-design a new civic initiative. Sophia met with them personally, running sessions not as a boss, but as a mentor. They discussed housing, health, education, and visibility. One fellow, a young mother named Janelle, burst into tears during a meeting. "I've never been in a room where people ask what I think without a clipboard," she said. Sophia simply took her hand. "You belong here." Marcus watched all of it, quietly. The way Sophia moved, not commanding, but guiding. The way she listened deeply, then spoke with precision. She wasn't just building programs, she was building leaders. On the 5th week, the mayor's office called, a formal invite. Sophia and Marcus were requested to appear at the upcoming City Forum on Innovation in Public-Private Partnerships. Sophia was hesitant. Feels like a trap. Could be, Marcus said. But if they're asking us to the table, we show up. We don't beg for seats. We pull up our own. The night of the event, Sophia wore deep green, no designer label, just elegance shaped by intention. Marcus, in charcoal gray, stood beside her as they entered the chamber hall. The forum was filled with polished rhetoric and polished people. But when Sophia spoke, the air changed. "We don't need more panels," she said, standing at the mic. "We need more pathways. The question isn't, how do we partner with communities? It's how do we let them lead?" A murmur of agreement passed through the room. She continued, "It's not charity. It's justice. And justice, by nature, makes power uncomfortable." There was no applause at first. Then someone stood, and another. Then a slow, rising clatter of hands that drowned out the awkward silence of those unsure whether they'd just been challenged or inspired. Later, as they left the hall and stepped into the cool night air, Marcus asked, "Did that feel like a trap?" Sophia smirked. "If it was, I think we just burned it down." He chuckled, then paused. "You know, I never planned on this." "On what?" "Being moved," he said quietly. Sophia didn't reply. She just walked beside him, shoulders squared against the breeze, knowing the real movement hadn't begun in a room full of officials. It had started the moment she refused to be watched and demanded to be seen. Sophia arrived at the office early, as always, but this morning something felt different. The sky was heavy with low clouds, the kind that made the world seem smaller, closer, almost watchful. She walked past the security desk, nodded politely to the guards, and took the stairs instead of the elevator, a habit she'd picked up during high-stress weeks. Movement steadied her thoughts. When she entered the open workspace of the Impact Strategies floor, a thick envelope lay on her desk. No name, no return address, just white paper, neatly sealed. She opened it, fingers steady even as her stomach tightened. Inside, photocopies of emails, dozens of them, conversations between executives, some from rival firms, others more painfully from inside Wellington Capital. Lines were highlighted. Words like token, overreach, and politically useful. Sophia's name appeared again and again, followed by dismissive jabs about her performative activism, Marcus's pet project, and even a suggestion that her background had been embellished for optics. She sat back, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Then came the final page. It was a formal complaint, unsigned but clearly written by someone within the compliance team. It accused Sophia of misappropriating funds meant for corporate philanthropy and steering them to unaudited, emotionally driven causes, namely Esperanza and its partner programs, the same programs that now fed, educated, and mentored over 300 youth in Seattle's underserved neighborhoods. Sophia didn't cry. She didn't slam a fist into the desk. She just folded the papers, stood, and walked to Marcus's office. He was already on a call, headset tucked around his ear, pacing. When he saw her, he ended the call mid-sentence. "Everything okay?" Wordlessly, she handed him the envelope. He read quickly, his face shifting from curiosity to anger, then to something more dangerous clarity. "This came to you?" She nodded. "No signature, no warning, just placed there." Marcus set the papers down and rubbed his temples. "This isn't just corporate pushback. This is a campaign. Coordinated," Sophia said. He looked at her, and close to home, she crossed her arms. "So now what?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he stood straighter. "We fight." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "With what? Good intentions? With records, with data, with every damn report and impact metric we've documented. And when that's not enough, we fight with community." She leaned forward. "You really think people outside care enough to speak up?" "I think they've been waiting for someone to ask." By the end of the week, they had gathered testimony from nearly every partner Esperanza had touched. Parents, teachers, students, even small business owners. Videos were edited, statements prepared. Sophia met with the firm's new ethics chair, demanded a hearing, and presented a compiled brief that rivaled most federal grant applications. She worked late every night, and not alone. Marcus was there beside her, sometimes arguing over language in a sentence, sometimes simply fetching dinner when she refused to break focus. At 11:12 p.m., on Thursday, as they were reviewing affidavits, Sophia paused. "Do you ever regret this?" Marcus looked up. "This as in, trusting me, bringing all this heat down on yourself." He didn't hesitate. "Never." Sophia searched his face, waiting for the catch. There wasn't one. "I didn't grow up believing men like you existed," she said softly. "And I didn't grow up thinking women like you would save my life," Marcus replied. They said nothing more, but the air between them shifted, no longer professional, no longer cautious. Something unspoken, strong, and undeniably human filled the quiet. The following Monday, the internal hearing was held in one of the larger boardrooms, usually reserved for client briefings. But today, it was a courtroom. Half the executive committee was present, 2 legal counsels, and Sophia, seated across the table, hands folded, eyes calm. She presented her report in full, metrics, letters, videos. She explained the process of fund allocation, the review protocols, the impact assessments. Her voice didn't shake once. Then came the questioning. It was pointed, sharp. "Were you ever promised full-time employment in exchange for this work?" Number. Did you bypass any system of formal approval? Not without verbal confirmation from Mr. Wellington, which I now understand should have been documented sooner. That's my learning curve, not malice. The legal chair leaned back. "Do you believe personal passion has clouded your professional judgment?" Sophia's gaze didn't waver. "I believe professional judgment without passion is what created this problem in the first place." A beat of silence. Then Marcus stood. "I authorized every move she made. If the fault lies anywhere, it lies with me. But if your discomfort stems from seeing an intern achieve what most of us have failed to do with full funding, then I suggest we look not at her actions but at our standards." The room went quiet. An hour later, the ruling came. No violation, no censure, and for the first time, a clause was added to the corporate policy. Community impact initiatives may be led and developed by junior associates pending executive review, including interns. Outside the hearing room, Marcus turned to Sophia. "We didn't win everything." She nodded. "But we held the line." He smiled faintly. "Number, you moved it." And this time, when they walked back down the hallway, there were no whispered doubts, only eyes that watched them with something resembling respect, maybe even belief. A week after the hearing, the building felt different. The shift wasn't seismic, walls didn't shake. Policies weren't rewritten in gold ink, but there was something quieter, more telling. When Sophia walked into a room, people looked up and greeted her. Not with caution, not with obligation, with recognition. She still carried her folder full of grant notes, still took the stairs, still spent more time at Esperanza than in her office. But now, her meetings were fuller. Her inbox held invitations, not just inquiries, and her title, though unofficial, now carried weight. People called her director without irony. Yet for all the changes outside, Sophia found herself wrestling with something inside. The storm had passed, but in its wake was exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from doing too much but from having to prove, over and over, that you belong. It was Friday afternoon when Marcus found her in the rooftop garden, sitting on one of the benches they'd installed months ago during the first renovation phase. She had her shoes off, bare feet pressed against the warm wood, eyes scanning a report but not really reading it. He approached quietly. Hiding from the next crisis? She didn't look up. "Just catching my breath before it starts." He sat beside her. "You know, most people would take a victory lap." Sophia smiled without mirth. "It doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like we patched one hole in a sinking ship." Marcus leaned back. "Maybe. Or maybe we just proved the ship was worth saving." She finally turned to him. "Why does it take so much to prove that what we're doing matters?" "Because it's easier to dismiss progress than to share credit." Sophia nodded slowly, then looked out over the skyline. "I keep thinking about all the other interns, the ones who never got a chance, the ones who left before someone saw them." Marcus followed her gaze. "You think we owe them something?" "I think we owe them everything." That weekend, Sophia sat alone in her apartment and wrote something she hadn't planned, a letter. Not to a board or a donor or a politician, but to her 16-year-old self. She wrote about fear. about being underestimated, about growing up watching her mother juggle 2 jobs and still find time to teach her how to speak truth without raising her voice. She ended it with a line she never thought she'd believe. "They'll try to stop you, but you'll learn not even locked doors can hold back someone who brings their own key." The next day, she brought the letter to Esperanza. Not to read it, but to post it. She taped it to the wall in the classroom where the teenagers gathered after school, a space they had painted together with murals, bookshelves, and maps dotted with the countries their families came from. A young girl named Layla read the letter slowly, then asked, "Miss Sophia, did you really feel like that too?" Sophia smiled. "Every day." Layla nodded, quiet for a long time, then said, "I want to write one too." Sophia got her a pen. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus sat in a meeting with the board of a new education trust, one he'd agreed to fund, but only if certain terms were met. He wanted full scholarship programs tied to impact work, internships that led to policy change, and a rotating mentorship council that included voices from outside the corporate world. The chairwoman raised an eyebrow. "You're asking us to fund community leaders with no traditional background. That's a gamble." Marcus leaned forward. "So was betting on a teenage girl from Queens with a love for literacy and no business degree. Her name's Sophia Bennett. And I'd make that bet again every time." The vote passed. By the time Marcus got back to his office, there was a message waiting. "Found a small school in Tacoma underfunded, mostly first-gen kids. Principal asked if we'd speak next Friday. You in?" "S." He replied immediately. "Only if you drive. I owe you a playlist." That Friday, the drive was long but easy, music low, windows cracked, fall wind dancing in the car. At the school, they were welcomed not with formality, but with warmth, handmade signs, giggles, and rows of folding chairs set up in the library. Sophia spoke first, not as a symbol, not as an exception, just as a woman who had been underestimated, and who now chose to overestimate every young person in that room. Marcus followed, brief and candid. "I'm not here because I always got it right," he said. "I'm here because I started listening to people who did." As they left, a boy about 10 years old chased after them. He handed Sophia a sketch of a tree with roots shaped like books. At the base, in shaky handwriting, "You help us grow." She knelt, smiled. "You're already growing." In the car, Marcus looked over at her. "That's going on the wall." Sophia nodded. "Next to my letter." They drove on, the sun beginning to dip below the skyline, the light stretching long and golden across the road, the kind of light that doesn't erase shadow, but gives it shape, the kind of light that finds those who never asked to be seen, but who now couldn't be ignored. And for the first time in a long while, Sophia didn't feel like she was fighting to hold her place. She felt like she was building a bridge and others were starting to cross. Winter came early that year. The city wore gray like a second skin, clouds hugging the skyline, sidewalks glossed with mist. But inside Wellington Capital's headquarters, a storm of a different kind brewed. Sophia stood at the edge of the main atrium, staring at a banner being installed above the central stairwell. Equity is not optional. Annual gala and community honors. It was the first time the company would host such an event, co-sponsored by local nonprofits and co-chaired by Sophia and Marcus. On paper, it looked like progress, but behind the scenes, cracks were forming. The day before, Sophia had received a forwarded email from a junior association internal thread among executives debating the optics of having too many activist figures on stage, with thinly veiled concern about alienating high-value investors. Marcus had seen it too. He was livid. "They still don't get it," he had said, pacing the floor of the strategy suite. "They think this is about quotas and appearances." Sophia, calmer, replied, "They think it's a phase. Like we're a season of programming that will quietly end." Now, she stood watching that banner rise and wondered what would outlast the moment, the mission or the masquerade. 3 nights later, the gala opened with a string quartet and chilled champagne. The grand ballroom glistened crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, donors in silk and satin. Photographers moved through the crowd like polite ghosts. Sophia wore deep navy, her hair pinned back simply. She hated the attention, but understood its necessity. She was the face now, not just of a department of a shift. Marcus, beside her, looked every bit the seasoned executive in his black tux, but his eyes kept scanning the room, noting who smiled with sincerity, who avoided their gaze, who waited to see if this experiment would quietly fade next quarter. A staffer approached with a clipboard. "Miss Bennett, you're scheduled to speak in 8 minutes." Sophia nodded. "I'll be ready." She turned toward the side entrance to gather herself before the speech. That's when she saw him Gerard Timms, a senior board member known for his charm and his resistance. He was speaking with 2 investors near the bar, laughing. When he noticed Sophia, he offered a polite nod, but it didn't reach his eyes. Marcus followed her gaze. He tried to cut the funding for the mentorship program last month. "I know. You still want to go up there?" Sophia didn't answer right away. Then, especially now, the room quieted as she stepped onto the stage. Behind her, the mural of Esperanza, now enlarged as a backdrop, showed children painting a tree of hands, each finger a different color. The image flickered slightly under the lights. Sophia looked out at the crowd. Then began. "When I first walked into this building, I did so quietly. I thought if I stayed small, stayed useful, I'd survive. And I did survive, but at a cost." She paused. "Tonight, we celebrate community. But real community requires discomfort. It demands we confront the systems that prefer silence to progress." The room shifted, ever so slightly. "I've read your reports. I know the language. ESG, Delaware I, impact metrics. But beyond the metrics are people children who now read at Esperanza because we said yes when it would have been easier to say not yet." She continued, voice steady. "This isn't a trend. It's a truth. We don't build legacy by being careful. We build it by being brave." Silence. Then a smattering of applause. Then more. Marcus stepped up beside her. "If this makes anyone uncomfortable, that's good. Change should feel like motion, not marketing." The applause swelled, but not everyone clapped. Gerard Timms sipped his drink, jaw tight. Later, as the gala wound down and guests filtered out, Sophia stepped onto the balcony to breathe. The cold air hit her face like a question. What comes after courage? Marcus joined her, handing her a warm cider. "You were brilliant." "I was angry," she said. He nodded. "Sometimes that's the same thing." They stood in silence for a moment, watching headlights blur across the wet streets below. Then Marcus said, "They'll push back harder now." "I know. They'll try to freeze the budget, undermine the programs." "I know." He turned toward her. "And?" Sophia looked out at the city. "Then we build it anyway." He smiled. "That's what I hoped you'd say." Just then, Sophia's phone buzzed. A text from Layla, the teen from Esperanza. "Our mural made the local paper. They called us the beating heart of change." Sophia grinned, then looked at Marcus. "They're watching." Let them," he said. "We've got nothing to hide." Below them, the city breathed flawed, beautiful, unfinished. And above it, two figures stood not as heroes or symbols, but as workers in the long, slow labor of justice. It began quietly, the way all real change does. The Monday after the gala, while the city's papers were still quoting Sophia's speech and dissecting Marcus's final line, Esperanza opened its doors at 6:45 a.m. as usual. The heaters buzzed to life. Coffee brewed. Children shuffled in wearing oversized coats, some with untied laces, some with big dreams in small notebooks. And Sophia was there not in heels or spotlight, but in her favorite boots and an old hoodie, rolling out boxes of donated books. She moved through the halls with muscle memory now. This place wasn't just a passion project. It was her rhythm, her anchor. Later that morning, Layla greeted her with a drawing, a stick figure standing on a tall bridge, arms raised. Underneath she had written, "Because you stood, we could walk." Sophia's throat tightened. She hugged the girl tightly. "You're building bridges now too, Layla." As the day went on, new volunteers came. A retired teacher who had watched the gala online. A local chef who offered to run weekend cooking classes. Even two interns from a rival firm, curious and tentative, asking, "Can we learn?" Word had spread, not as a headline, but as a heartbeat. Back at Wellington Capital, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the numbers on a quarterly impact report. Not because they were impressive, they were, but because each statistic had a name, a moment, a ripple, and behind every ripple was Sophia. The knock came mid-morning. He looked up. It was Sophia. "I thought you were off today," he said. "I was. But something came up." She walked in and set a letter on his desk. He picked it up. Read, then read again. It was a resignation. He looked up slowly. "You're leaving?" She nodded. "Not from the work. Just from the title." He leaned back. "Tell me why." "Because it's time. The work can't live in one office. It needs roots, Marcus. It needs to grow beyond the brand." He rubbed his jaw. "And you?" "I'm taking what we built and planting it everywhere else." He stared at her, pride warring with sadness. "You know they'll say you quit because you were afraid." Sophia smiled. "Let them talk. I'll be too busy doing." He stood and extended his hand, but she hugged him instead. It wasn't goodbye. Not really. 3 months later, Sophia stood in front of a modest building on the edge of Beacon Hill. The paint was chipped. The sign was temporary. The Bennett Center for Civic Leadership. But the voices inside were loud in the best way. Young people debating policy, elders sharing strategy, artists sketching future cities. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't sleek. But it was hers. Theirs. Marcus visited sometimes. Not as a CEO, but as a mentor. A friend. They still argued over methods. Still swapped stories. And sometimes, they just sat and listened. On one visit, he found a new mural being painted on the east wall. It showed a tree with roots of books, like the drawing Layla had given her months ago. But this time, at the base of the tree, stood 2 figures, a woman and a man, shoulder to shoulder, holding up a bridge. Marcus touched the wall gently. A volunteer passed by. "You know, the girl who designed that mural said it was about building something stronger than fear." He smiled. She'd know. That evening, before leaving, Marcus found Sophia reviewing notes for a town hall. "You're really doing it," he said. She looked up. "Doing what?" "Changing the story. One sentence at a time." She shrugged. "It's not just me." "No," he said. "But you were the sentence that changed the page." They stood in comfortable silence. Then Sophia said, "There's more to write." Marcus nodded. "There always is." As he left, she turned off the lights, locking the door behind him. The street was quiet, but not empty. Somewhere, a child laughed. A bus rumbled by. A mural dried in the cold air. And inside that center, hope waited. Not on a stage, not in a press release, but on the next breath, the next step, the next hand reaching back to pull another forward. Because justice isn't loud. It's steady, and it never stops walking.